I'm Ryan Mitchell, 34, and successful in everything except love. Walking alone into my cousin Jessica's wedding felt like entering a lion's den. The whispers started immediately. He couldn't even find a date. My sister Melanie hissed to our mother, loud enough for me to hear. I straightened my tie, forced a smile, and kept walking. Little did they know, this wedding would change everything. Before I continue this wild story, where are you watching from? Hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling family. Trust me. What happens next left my entire judgmental family completely speechless. My position as the black sheep in a family obsessed with status was established early. Growing up in an affluent suburb of Boston, the Mitchell family name carried weight in local social circles, something my parents Harold and Patricia never let me forget. While other kids played sports or attended social events, I was building computers in my bedroom, fascinated by the logical world of programming where merit, not appearance or social graces, determined success. Ryan, why can't you be more like your cousins? My mother would sigh after yet another school dance I attended solo. At your age, your father was already president of his fraternity and dating the most popular girl in school. My father, a corporate attorney with old money connections, viewed my interest in technology as a peculiar hobby that would eventually give way to a respectable career in law or finance. When I announced my computer science major at MIT, he barely concealed his disappointment. Computers are for the people who work for people like us, Ryan, he said over an uncomfortable family dinner. Mitchell men lead from the front, not from behind screens. My sister Melanie, 2 years younger but infinitely more socially adept, became the family's pride. She dated the right boys, joined the right sororities, and eventually married James, a surgical resident from a good family. Her wedding 3 years ago was the last time I'd endured a full family gathering, and I'd come with Stephanie, my girlfriend of 2 years. At least you finally found someone, Melanie had whispered while hugging me at her reception. I was starting to think you might be broken. Stephanie and I had met through work, both of us developers at a financial software company. She understood my passion for coding and my drive to create something meaningful. For 2 years, we balanced our relationship and our careers, until my startup began gaining traction. The late nights, the investor meetings, the constant problem solving, I threw myself into building my company, confident that Stephanie understood this temporary sacrifice. She didn't. 2 weeks before Jessica's wedding, she ended things. You're married to your work, Ryan, she said, packing her things from my apartment. I need someone who's present, who makes me a priority. Someone who doesn't cancel dinner plans because a server crashed. I couldn't argue. She was right. But her timing couldn't have been worse with Jessica's wedding looming. Jessica, my father's brother's daughter, was marrying into the Wellington family, old money, political connections, the works. The wedding at the Grand Windsor Hotel was set to be the social event of the season, and my RSVP had already been sent, +1. My Aunt Clara, my father's sister, and the only family member who seemed to understand me, called the night before the wedding. Coming solo tomorrow? She asked without judgment in her voice. Yeah. Stephanie and I broke up. I'm sorry to hear that. But you know what? Come anyway. Hold your head high. Your worth isn't determined by whether you have a date on your arm. Clara had always been different from the rest of the Mitchells. She pursued a career in academic research, never married, and seemed genuinely happy. The family viewed her as eccentric but tolerated her because her work in biochemistry had brought some prestige. They're going to have a field day with this, I said, already imagining the comments. Let them. You've built a successful company from nothing. That's more than most of them have accomplished. My startup, NetSecure Solutions, had indeed become successful beyond even my expectations. We'd developed a revolutionary approach to network security that was attracting serious attention from major tech companies. I'd grown the team from just me to 15 employees in 18 months, and our valuation was climbing. But in my family, building a technology company didn't count as real success, not like making partner at a law firm or marrying into wealth. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of my mirror adjusting my tie, rehearsing responses to the inevitable questions and comments. Yes, Stephanie and I broke up. No, I'm focusing on my company right now. Yes. I'm sure I'll meet someone when the time is right. I'd repeated variations of these lines at every family event since college. As I grabbed my keys and wedding gift, I reminded myself of what Clara had said. My worth wasn't determined by having a date. I just needed to get through this day with my dignity intact. Little did I know that this wedding wouldn't just test my patience with my family. It would completely transform my relationship with them forever. The Grand Windsor Hotel lived up to its reputation. Nestled in downtown Boston's historic district, its limestone facade and grand columns screamed old money and tradition. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, disgorging guests in designer attire. I pulled up in my Tesla, a practical indulgence after my company's first round of serious funding, and handed the keys to the valet. Standing at the base of the marble stairs leading to the entrance, I seriously considered turning around. I could text Aunt Clara some excuse about a work emergency. With my company's rapid growth, it would be believable. I even pulled out my phone, fingers hovering over the screen. Mr. Mitchell? A young attendant approached, clipboard in hand. The Wellington Mitchell wedding? And just like that, my window of escape closed. Yes, that's me. The ceremony will begin in the grand ballroom in 30 minutes. Please sign the guest book in the foyer. The hotel's interior was even more opulent than its exterior, crystal chandeliers, gilded mirrors, and floral arrangements that probably cost more than my first car. Guests clustered in elegant groups, champagne flutes in hand, voices carrying that distinctive Boston Brahmin tone that my parents had unsuccessfully tried to instill in me. At the reception table, a young woman in a tailored dress checked her list. Name, please? Ryan Mitchell. Her finger scanned the list. Mitchell, here you are. And your guest? The dreaded moment. It's just me. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes registered that particular blend of pity and judgment I'd grown accustomed to. I see. You're at table 14. She handed me a place card with elegant calligraphy. I already knew what table 14 meant. Not the family tables near the front, not the tables for close friends of the bride and groom. Table 14 would be the miscellaneous table, distant relatives, colleagues who couldn't be excluded, and singles who couldn't be paired with anyone else. The leftover table. As I entered the pre-ceremony reception area, I spotted my parents holding court with my Uncle Robert and his wife. My mother's eyes found me, widened slightly at my solo entrance, then quickly regained composure. She whispered something to my father, whose head turned sharply in my direction. Before I could decide whether to approach them or find Aunt Clara, Melanie intercepted me, glass of champagne in hand, her husband James trailing behind. Ryan! You made it! Her eyes darted past me, searching. Alone? Hello to you too, Melanie. Where's Stephanie? Don't tell me she had to work on a Saturday. The slight emphasis on work carried her disapproval of both my career and my ex-girlfriend's. We broke up, actually. Melanie's expression shifted from surprise to a barely concealed satisfaction that made my stomach twist. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Though I'm not entirely surprised. She always seemed so committed to her career. The irony of Melanie criticizing another woman's career ambitions when she'd abandoned her own marketing job the moment she got engaged wasn't lost on me. It happens, I said neutrally, accepting a champagne flute from a passing server. Well, Jessica will be disappointed. She was looking forward to seeing Stephanie again. They really hit it off at my wedding. Translation: Jessica and her friends had approved of Stephanie as sufficiently normal and socially acceptable, unlike most of my life choices. I'm sure she'll survive the disappointment," I replied, taking a larger sip of champagne than etiquette would recommend. James, sensing tension, attempted to change the subject. "How's the startup going? Still doing that security thing?" Before I could answer, my cousin Brad appeared, slapping me on the shoulder with unnecessary force. Brad, Jessica's brother, had been my childhood tormentor and adult nemesis. While I'd gone to MIT, he'd attended Harvard Business School and never let anyone forget it, despite his mediocre performance at his father's investment firm. "Ryan Mitchell! Going stag at another wedding?" His voice carried, drawing attention from nearby guests. "Still too busy coding to find a girlfriend?" "Brad?" I nodded, not rising to the bait. "Congratulations on your sister's big day." "Yeah, she's done well for herself. Wellington family has connections everywhere." He leaned in, bourbon on his breath. "You should network while you're here. Might find some investors for that little computer project of yours. Or maybe even a date." I forced a smile. "I'll keep that in mind." Over Brad's shoulder, I spotted a familiar figure entering the reception area. Stephanie. She looked stunning in a blue dress I'd never seen before, her arm linked with a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit. My stomach dropped. Melanie followed my gaze and her eyes lit up with malicious delight. "Oh, Stephanie made it! And that must be Richard. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon at Mass General." They'd been dating for almost a month now. A month? We'd broken up 2 weeks ago. "Excuse me," I muttered, moving quickly toward the bar before Stephanie could spot me. As I retreated, I heard Brad's voice carrying across the room. "Poor Ryan. Always a coding monkey, never a groom." The laughter that followed burned more than I wanted to admit. I found a relatively quiet corner of the bar and ordered a scotch, neat. As I took the first sip, I spotted Aunt Clara making her way toward me, elegant in a simple navy dress. Her silver hair swept into a classic updo. "That bad already?" she asked, eyeing my drink. "Stephanie's here. With her new boyfriend. A cardiothoracic surgeon she's apparently been dating since before we broke up." Clara winced. "I'm sorry, Ryan. It's fine. Really. Just makes the family commentary more pointed. They only have power if you give it to them," she said, ordering a martini. "Remember what I said?" I nodded, but at that moment my mother appeared beside us, her smile tight. "Ryan, darling." I didn't get a chance to say hello properly. She air-kissed my cheek. "Where's Stephanie?" Clara and I exchanged glances. "We broke up, Mom." Her smile faltered for just a second. "Oh. Well. That's unfortunate timing. Your father was hoping to introduce her to Judge Harrington. He's here with his daughter, you know. Lovely girl, just finished law school at Yale." And there it was, not even a moment of sympathy before the matchmaking began. "I'm not interested in being set up today, Mom." "Don't be difficult, Ryan. Networking is important. Especially for someone in your situation." My situation being my unconventional career and now my single status. "The ceremony's about to start," I said, finishing my scotch. "Shouldn't we find our seats?" As we moved toward the ballroom, I caught snippets of conversation about me. Harold's son, the computer person. Always been a bit odd. Showed up alone again. Such a shame, he's not unattractive. Each comment was a small cut, nothing fatal on its own, but the accumulation was wearing me down. I checked my table assignment again, table 14, as expected. Far from the main action. I took a deep breath and entered the ballroom, determined to endure the next few hours with as much grace as I could muster. Little did I know that fate had other plans. And my family's perception of me was about to change dramatically. With 15 minutes before the ceremony began, I escaped back to the hotel bar. The Grand Windsor's bar was an oak-paneled sanctuary with dim lighting and leather chairs, the perfect place to temporarily hide from family judgment. I ordered another scotch and found a quiet corner table, loosening my tie slightly. Is this seat taken? I looked up to find a woman gesturing to the chair opposite mine. She was striking, tall, with dark hair pulled back in an elegant twist, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. Not typical wedding attire, but she carried it with such confidence that it seemed perfectly appropriate. All yours, I replied. She sat down gracefully, setting a small leather portfolio on the table. Thanks. I need a moment before diving into the social circus. Her voice had a slight rasp to it, like she was used to giving directions and having them followed. Not a fan of weddings? I asked. I appreciate the celebration of commitment. It's the performative social aspects I find exhausting. She extended her hand. Alexandra Carter. Ryan Mitchell. We shook hands. Her grip firm and confident. Mitchell? Are you related to the bride or groom? Bride. She's my cousin. She smiled. Ah, so you're in the thick of it. Family obligation? That obvious? You have the look of someone attending their own sentencing hearing rather than a celebration. I laughed, surprised by her candor. That's pretty accurate, actually. The bartender delivered her vodka martini, and she raised it slightly. To surviving family obligations. We clinked glasses, and I felt some of my tension dissolve. There was something refreshing about her directness. So what's your connection to the happy couple? I asked. Business association with the Wellington family. Thomas Wellington's firm has partnered with my company on several ventures. She took a sip of her martini. I'm actually running late. Had to wrap up a conference call with Tokyo before coming over. Hence the power suit instead of traditional wedding attire? She glanced down at herself with a small smile. I have a dress in my suite upstairs. But yes, work comes first. Always has. Something in her tone resonated with me. I understand that completely. Alexandra tilted her head slightly. What do you do, Ryan Mitchell? I run a cybersecurity startup. NetSecure Solutions. Her eyebrows raised with what appeared to be genuine interest. The one that developed that distributed authentication protocol? I read about your approach in Tech Innovator last month. I couldn't hide my surprise. Most people's eyes glazed over when I mentioned my work, and few outside the industry had even heard of my company. You follow cybersecurity developments? I follow innovation in all forms. Security is particularly relevant to my interests. She leaned forward slightly. Your multi-layered approach to network protection is impressive. How are you handling the quantum computing challenge? For the next 10 minutes, we dove into a technical discussion that would have bored most wedding guests to tears but had us both animated and engaged. Alexandra asked insightful questions that suggested she had more than a passing knowledge of the field. We're working on a quantum-resistant algorithm, I explained, sketching a quick diagram on a cocktail napkin. The challenge is maintaining efficiency while increasing complexity. She studied my sketch, then took the pen and made a slight modification. Have you considered this approach? It might resolve your throughput issues. I stared at her addition, then let out a low whistle. That's actually brilliant. Are you in the tech sector? She smiled enigmatically. Among other things. I have diverse interests. Before I could probe further, she glanced at her watch. The ceremony must be starting soon. I should go change. Right. I'd almost forgotten where we were. I should get back to before my family sends a search party. Alexandra hesitated, then asked, They don't appreciate your work, do they? Your family. The question caught me off guard with its accuracy. How did you know? Recognition. I've been there. She gathered her portfolio. Success is the best revenge, Ryan. Though sometimes it's also satisfying to show them exactly what they've overlooked. As she stood to leave, I felt a strange reluctance to end our conversation. Will I see you at the reception? Count on it. She smiled, a confident curve of her lips. Save me a dance? Absolutely. As she walked away, I realized I'd just had the most stimulating conversation I'd experienced in months. And with a complete stranger no less. I couldn't place why she seemed vaguely familiar. Perhaps she'd been featured in some business publication I'd read. I checked my watch and downed the last of my scotch. The ceremony would start in 5 minutes, and showing up late would only give my family more ammunition. As I hurried back to the ballroom, I felt oddly energized by the encounter. For a brief moment, I'd been seen for my mind rather than judged for my relationship status. Little did I know that Alexandra Carter would soon turn my family's perception of me completely upside down. I slipped into the grand ballroom just as the string quartet began playing Pachelbel's canon, signaling the ceremony was about to begin. The room had been transformed into a floral wonderland, with white roses and cascading greenery creating an atmosphere of refined elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the assembled guests. All turned expectantly toward the flower-adorned altar. As I made my way to my assigned seat, I caught my mother's disapproving glance from the family section. Her eyes darted meaningfully to her diamond-encrusted watch. Even though I wasn't technically late, in Patricia Mitchell's world, anything less than 15 minutes early was considered tardy. My seat at table 14 was exactly as I'd feared, a collection of distant relatives, ancient great-aunts, and corporate acquaintances who couldn't be excluded but weren't important enough for prime placement. I nodded politely to an elderly gentleman who introduced himself as my father's second cousin, and a middle-aged couple who worked with the bride's father. From across the room, I spotted Stephanie seated much closer to the front, her new boyfriend's arm draped possessively around her shoulders. She caught my eye briefly, then quickly looked away, leaning closer to her cardiothoracic surgeon. The message was clear. She had upgraded. As the bridal procession began, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I discreetly checked it to find a text from my mother. Judge Harrington's daughter Caroline is at table 7. Lovely girl. Harvard Law. Very pretty. Go introduce yourself after ceremony. Before I could even react, another text came through, this one from Melanie. Mom says you and Stephanie broke up. Downloaded Hinge on my phone. Will swipe for you during reception. Your profile needs work, by the way. I silenced my phone and shoved it back in my pocket, feeling my jaw tighten. The procession continued with bridesmaids floating down the aisle in champagne-colored gowns, followed by the flower girls scattering rose petals. Throughout it all, I could feel occasional glances from family members, some concerned, others smug, all evaluating my solo status. The music swelled as Jessica appeared at the entrance, radiant in a custom Vera Wang gown. She truly looked beautiful, and despite my discomfort, I felt a genuine happiness for my cousin. Her fiancé Matthew waited at the altar, his face transformed with love as he watched her approach. As Jessica passed my row, her eyes met mine briefly. I smiled sincerely, and she returned it before continuing her procession. Whatever my issues with the family, Jessica had always been kind to me, even if we weren't particularly close. The ceremony proceeded with all the pomp and circumstance expected of a high-society Boston wedding. The officiator, a distinguished judge who was apparently a Wellington family friend, spoke eloquently about the joining of two prestigious families and the bright future ahead for the couple. During the vows, my phone vibrated again. I tried to ignore it, but when it continued to buzz insistently, I discreetly checked it under the pretense of pulling out my handkerchief. My father. Talk to Caroline Harrington. Her father sits on boards of 3 major banks. Good connections for you. Another from an aunt. Saw Stephanie with new boyfriend. So sorry, dear. Have you tried that Coffee Meets Bagel app? My dental hygienist's daughter met her husband there. And most painfully, from Brad. Hey cuz. Got 3 single women at my table asking if you're gay or just weird. What should I tell them? Faced with tears of joy, I turned my phone off completely, feeling heat rise to my face. As the couple exchanged rings, I caught my father's eye across the aisle. His look of disappointment was so familiar it almost didn't register anymore. Almost. The ceremony reached its climax with the traditional, "You may kiss the bride" moment, followed by thunderous applause as Jessica and Matthew turned to face the crowd as husband and wife. The recessional music played as they walked back down the aisle, guests beaming at the newly married couple. As the formal procession ended and people began to rise from their seats, preparing to move to the reception hall, my Aunt Clara appeared beside me. "You look like you could use rescuing," she said quietly. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been there." She linked her arm through mine. "Come on. I'll run interference for you during the transition to the reception." As we made our way through the crowd, Clara expertly steered me away from potential family confrontations, making small talk with various guests who might otherwise have cornered me with invasive questions about my love life. "Have you seen your ex yet?" Clara asked discreetly. "Yes." "With her new boyfriend?" "A surgeon, apparently." Clara rolled her eyes. "Of course he is. Probably has the personality of a cardboard cutout." I couldn't help but smile. "Thanks for this, by the way," I said, gesturing to her protective escort. "Families should support each other, not tear each other down," she replied. "I'm proud of what you've built, Ryan. Don't let them make you forget that." As we approached the reception hall entrance, my mother intercepted us, her social smile firmly in place. "Ryan, darling, I'd been looking everywhere for you. Caroline Harrington is just over there in the blue dress. Let me introduce you before dinner." "Mom, I'm not interested in being set up today," I said firmly. "Don't be difficult, Ryan. Caroline is exactly the sort of girl you should be dating. Her family is very well connected, and she's quite accomplished herself." Clara intervened smoothly. "Patricia, give the boy some space. He's a grown man running a successful company, not a teenager who needs his mother arranging play dates." My mother's smile tightened. "Clara, with all due respect, Ryan's personal life could use some guidance. And I hardly think your example of perpetual singlehood is the model he should follow." The barb hit its mark, but Clara merely raised an eyebrow. "Better single than merely an accessory to someone else's life, wouldn't you say?" Before my mother could respond, we were interrupted by the wedding planner announcing that guests should take their seats for dinner and the reception formalities. With a final meaningful look at me, my mother rejoined my father, who was deep in conversation with a federal judge. "Don't let her get to you," Clara said. "Or any of them." But as we parted ways to find our respective tables, I couldn't help but feel the weight of my family's expectations and judgments pressing down on me. I was a successful entrepreneur running a rapidly growing company valued at millions, yet here I was, feeling like an awkward teenager because I'd shown up to a wedding without a date. As I took my seat at table 14, I couldn't help wondering if Alexandra Carter had changed into her dress yet, and whether she would remember her promise to save me a dance. The thought gave me something to look forward to amid what promised to be an excruciating reception. Little did I know that the most dramatic moment of the evening was yet to come, and it would transform my family's perception of me in ways I could never have imagined. The reception began with all the pomp and circumstance expected of a Wellington Mitchell wedding. The Grand Windsor's ballroom had been transformed during the ceremony transition, with elaborate floral centerpieces adorning each table, crystal stemware catching the light from overhead chandeliers, and a live band setting up on a raised platform. The MC, a polished professional with the smooth voice of a radio announcer, took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and welcome for the first time as husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Matthew and Jessica Wellington." The double doors swung open as the newlyweds entered to thunderous applause, Jessica beaming and Matthew looking appropriately proud. They proceeded directly to the dance floor for their first dance, a choreographed waltz to, at last, that spoke of many practiced hours. From my seat at table 14, which was exactly as I'd feared, Positioned near the kitchen entrance and populated by elderly relatives and corporate acquaintances, I had a clear view of the head table where the wedding party would soon be seated. I also had an unfortunate line of sight to my family's tables near the front, where my parents, Melanie and James, and various Mitchell and Wellington relatives were clustered. As the first dance concluded, the MC continued with introductions. Now let's welcome the parents of the bride, Mr. and Mrs. Robert and Diana Mitchell. My uncle and aunt entered, waving regally to the assembled guests. And the parents of the groom, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas and Elizabeth Wellington. The introductions continued with the entire wedding party, each couple entering arm in arm to appreciative applause. I watched as Brad entered with the maid of honor, shooting me a smug look as he passed my table. Once the formalities concluded and guests were invited to enjoy cocktail hour before dinner, I found myself trapped in increasingly uncomfortable conversations. "So you work with computers?" asked my father's elderly Aunt Gertrude, nearly shouting despite sitting directly beside me. "My grandson fixes computers too. Perhaps you know him? Timothy Baker from Fresno?" "Different field." "Actually," I attempted to explain, not for the first time. "And no special lady in your life?" continued another elderly relative, patting my hand sympathetically. "A handsome boy like you? In my day, you'd have been snatched up already." I smiled politely, scanning the room for signs of Alexandra. I hadn't seen her since our conversation at the bar, and I was beginning to wonder if she decided to skip the reception entirely. My phone, which I'd reluctantly turned back on, buzzed with a new text from Melanie. "Made you a profile on Elite Singles. Better clientele than Hinge. Already got 3 potential matches. Come to my table to see." I ignored it, only to receive another moments later. "Mom says Judge Harrington asking about you. Caroline apparently thought you were cute from afar. Bathroom mirror selfie on your dating profile not helping your case though." With growing horror, I realized Melanie had actually created dating profiles for me without my knowledge or consent, complete with photos she must have pulled from my social media. Before I could respond, the familiar voice of the MC cut through the buzz of conversation. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the dance floor all married couples for a special celebration of love." The dance floor quickly filled with couples, my parents, Melanie and James, countless relatives and friends, all paired off and swaying to the music. From my isolated position at table 14, I couldn't have felt more conspicuously alone if I'd been wearing a neon sign. My mother caught my eye from the dance floor and tilted her head meaningfully toward a young woman in blue whom I assumed must be the fabled Caroline Harrington. I pretended not to notice, taking a large sip of wine instead. As the couple's dance continued, I spotted Stephanie and her surgeon, looking picture-perfect as they moved gracefully across the floor. She laughed at something he whispered in her ear, and I felt a pang of something, not jealousy exactly, but a sense of failure that I couldn't quite shake. When the dance ended, there was a brief lull before dinner service began. I was considering making a tactical retreat to the bar when Melanie appeared at my table, phone in hand. "Ryan, you have to see these profiles I've set up for you. This one woman is perfect. She's a legal consultant, but she also coaches tennis on weekends. So she's not just a workaholic like Stephanie?" I finished for her. "Or like me?" Melanie had the grace to look slightly abashed, but pressed on. "I'm just trying to help. The whole family is worried about you." "I don't need help, Melanie. I'm doing fine." "Are you?" "Because showing up alone to another family wedding doesn't scream doing fine to me." Before I could respond, my mother joined us, dragging my reluctant father in her wake. "Ryan, darling, we're about to do family photos. And I've told the Harringtons you'll join their table for dessert." "Mom, I'm not interested in being set up." "It's not a setup," she insisted, though her expression said otherwise. "It's networking." My father cleared his throat. "Son, your mother is just trying to help. Your situation is concerning to us." My situation? I repeated, feeling my temper rising. You mean my multimillion-dollar company that's revolutionizing network security? Or do you mean the fact that I'm single at 34, which somehow negates every other accomplishment in your eyes? Don't make a scene, my mother hissed, glancing around at nearby tables. We're simply suggesting that there's more to life than work. Balance is important. That's rich coming from Dad, who missed half my high school events because he was working late. My father's face darkened. That was different. I was building a career that would support this family. And what do you think I'm doing? Playing with computers, he said dismissively. It's not the same as real work. The words stung more than they should have after all these years. Before I could respond, Brad appeared, champagne in hand and clearly enjoying the family tension. Hey, Uncle Harold, Aunt Patricia. What's going on? Trying to find Ryan a date? He chuckled. Good luck with that. I told the girls at my table he's married to his laptop. Several nearby guests turned to look, some smiling at Brad's joke. I felt my face growing hot with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. Maybe I'm just selective, I said evenly. I prefer substance over social status. Brad snorted. Yeah. That's why you're alone. Too selective. Nothing to do with your thrilling conversations about firewalls and coding. Melanie, sensing the escalating tension, attempted intervention. Let's all calm down. It's Jessica's day, remember? Exactly. My mother agreed. Which is why Ryan should make an effort to be sociable. Caroline Harrington is a lovely girl from an excellent family. I'm not interested in Caroline Harrington, I said firmly. Well, you need to be interested in someone, my mother insisted. At this rate, your biological clock will run out before you ever give us grandchildren. The comment was so absurd I almost laughed, but the genuine concern in her eyes stopped me. She truly believed my life was somehow incomplete, a failure even, despite all I had accomplished. I think I need some air, I said, standing abruptly. As I turned to leave, the MC's voice boomed through the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, dinner service will begin momentarily. Please find your seats. Trapped, I reluctantly sat back down at table 14. Now feeling every pair of eyes in the room on me. The elderly relatives at my table pretended they hadn't overheard the family confrontation, but their pitying glances told me otherwise. As the servers began delivering the first course, I stared at my plate, appetite gone, wondering if I could politely excuse myself after the main course without causing another scene. The reception stretched before me like an endless gauntlet of judgment and humiliation. Just as I was contemplating a strategic retreat to the restroom, the ballroom doors swung open dramatically. The conversation in the room dimmed as heads turned toward the unexpected interruption. And there, framed in the doorway, stood Alexandra Carter, transformed from our earlier meeting into a vision in a stunning emerald gown that immediately identified her as someone of significance. The room's reaction confirmed it. Whispers erupted as people recognized her, nudging each other and pointing discreetly. Is that Alexandra Carter? The tech billionaire? The CEO of Carter Innovations? Forbes Businesswoman of the Year? With graceful confidence, Alexandra scanned the room until her eyes found mine. Then, to my complete astonishment, she smiled and began walking directly toward me, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed in her wake. My family, seated just a few tables away, watched in shocked silence as one of the most powerful women in the technology world approached their supposedly unsuccessful, perpetually single son. I stood automatically as she reached my table, my mind racing to process what was happening. Alexandra didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, took my hand in hers, and said in a voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "Sorry I'm late, love." The Tokyo deal ran longer than expected. Then she leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, her hand squeezing mine in a silent signal. As she pulled back, she whispered quickly in my ear, "Play along. I overheard your family earlier. You deserve better." Before I could respond, she turned to face my wide-eyed tablemates with a dazzling smile. I hope you've been taking good care of Ryan while I was delayed. And just like that, the trajectory of the evening, and my family's perception of me, changed completely. The ballroom had fallen into a hushed silence. Alexandra Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Innovations, tech visionary, and one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America, was holding my hand as if we were intimate partners. The emerald gown she wore was clearly designer, its elegant simplicity somehow making every other woman's dress look overdone. Her dark hair was now styled in loose waves that framed her face, highlighting her confident smile. I began. Then found my voice. I was beginning to think you wouldn't make it. Alexandra squeezed my hand again, her eyes twinkling with conspiracy. And miss seeing you in that suit? Never. She turned to the elderly woman beside my chair. I don't believe we've met. I'm Alexandra Carter, Ryan's partner. Gertrude Mitchell. My father's aunt replied faintly, clearly overwhelmed. Harold's aunt. Ryan's grand-aunt, I suppose? Lovely to meet you. Ryan's told me so much about his family. I pulled out the empty chair beside mine, my mind racing to keep up with this unexpected turn of events. Please sit down. They're just about to serve dinner. As Alexandra gracefully took her seat, I became aware of the wave of whispers spreading across the ballroom, the looks of astonishment, and most satisfyingly, the dropped jaws of my immediate family members. Melanie's champagne glass was frozen halfway to her mouth, while my mother appeared to be having difficulty processing what she was seeing. Brad's expression had transformed from smug superiority to utter confusion. You don't have to do this, I whispered to Alexandra as she arranged her napkin in her lap. I know, she replied quietly. But sometimes the universe presents an opportunity for perfect justice. Besides, I'm enjoying myself already. A server appeared almost instantaneously, clearly. The staff had been alerted to Alexandra Carter's presence, offering champagne and the first course. Ms. Carter, we're honored to have you join us, the server said with a deference that hadn't been extended to table 14 previously. Would you prefer the halibut or the beef tenderloin for the main course? The halibut sounds wonderful. Thank you, she replied warmly. As the server departed, I noticed a commotion at my family's table. My mother was urgently whispering to my father, who kept glancing in our direction with an expression of disbelief. Melanie was frantically typing on her phone, probably Googling Alexandra to confirm her identity. Your family seems interested, Alexandra noted with amusement. They're in shock. I'm in shock, honestly. Well, get ready for more shock, she murmured. Just as my mother rose from her seat and began making her way toward us, my father reluctantly in tow. Ryan, darling! My mother's voice had risen an octave and taken on a warmth I hadn't heard directed at me in years. Aren't you going to introduce us to your friend? Alexandra stood gracefully, extending her hand. Alexandra Carter. You must be Patricia Mitchell. Ryan speaks so highly of you. My mother took her hand, visibly flustered. He does? I mean, of course, we're very close. My father stepped forward. Harold Mitchell. Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Carter. I must say, this is quite a surprise. Ryan likes to keep his personal life private, Alexandra replied smoothly. Especially given my public profile. The press can be so invasive. Of course, my father agreed, as if he'd always understood my need for privacy rather than interpreting it as social failure. Very sensible approach. How did you two meet? My mother asked, her eyes calculating as she tried to reconcile this new information with her perception of me. Alexandra turned to me with a warm smile. Should I tell them, or would you like to? I decided to lean into the charade. We met at a cybersecurity conference in San Francisco last year. Alexandra was the keynote speaker. Ryan's presentation on distributed authentication protocols caught my attention, Alexandra continued seamlessly. His approach to quantum-resistant encryption was revolutionary. I knew immediately I needed him in my life. My mother blinked rapidly, processing this information. Well, that's wonderful. And you've been together since then? We've been taking things slowly, Alexandra replied, placing her hand over mine on the table. Both running companies, busy schedules. But some things are worth making time for. The genuine warmth in her voice was so convincing that for a moment, even I almost believed we were a couple. My father, who had spent years dismissing my career as playing with computers, was now looking at me with newfound respect. Ryan never mentioned he was working with Carter Innovations. We've kept our personal and professional relationships separate. I improvised. Ethics matter to both of us. Absolutely, Alexandra agreed. Though we're exploring some exciting synergies between our companies now that things are more established between us. Before my parents could respond, the wedding photographer appeared, clearly having been dispatched by someone in the wedding party who'd recognized Alexandra. Excuse me, Ms. Carter? The bride and groom were hoping you might join them for a few photos after dinner. Alexandra smiled graciously. I'd be delighted, as long as Ryan joins us. Of course. The photographer agreed instantly. My mother seized the opportunity. We should let you enjoy your dinner. But perhaps you'll both join us at our table for dessert? The family would love to get to know you better. That sounds lovely, Alexandra replied, her diplomatic skills clearly well honed. As my parents reluctantly retreated, I turned to Alexandra in amazement. I can't believe you're doing this. Are you kidding? This is the most fun I've had at a society wedding in years. She took a sip of champagne, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Besides, I wasn't entirely making it up. Your work really is impressive, Ryan. I've been following NetSecure's development since your series of funding. Before I could respond, Melanie appeared, having apparently decided she couldn't wait until dessert. James trailed behind her, looking equal parts confused and impressed. Ryan! Melanie's voice was syrupy sweet. Aren't you going to introduce me to your girlfriend? Alexandra, this is my sister Melanie and her husband James, I said, deciding to enjoy this unexpected turn of events. Melanie, this is Alexandra Carter. I know exactly who you are, Melanie gushed, extending her hand. Your work in AI integration is groundbreaking. I read your profile in Business Insider last month. Alexandra shook her hand with a measured smile. Thank you. Ryan tells me you work in marketing? I did, yes, before focusing on family, Melanie replied, though I've been considering getting back into it. Actually, Carter Innovations has an amazing reputation as an employer. Perhaps Ryan could put in a good word. I nearly choked on my champagne at Melanie's transparent networking attempt. Our hiring process is quite rigorous, Alexandra replied diplomatically. But I'm sure Ryan would be happy to recommend qualified candidates. Melanie's smile faltered slightly. Of course. So, how long have you two been keeping this relationship secret? Some things are too precious to share with the world right away, Alexandra replied, reaching over to straighten my tie in an intimate gesture that sent Melanie's eyebrows climbing toward her hairline. As Melanie opened her mouth to ask another question, she was interrupted by the approach of Brad, who couldn't resist joining the commotion. Alexandra Carter, he said, extending his hand with his most charming smile. Brad Mitchell, Ryan's cousin? I'm in private equity with Wellington Partners. How nice, Alexandra replied coolly, her handshake noticeably briefer than it had been with my parents. I have to say, you've certainly kept this relationship quiet, Ryan, Brad continued, his tone suggesting he wasn't entirely convinced. Never mentioned a word about dating one of the most eligible bachelorettes in America. Some people prefer to be known for their accomplishments rather than their romantic life, I replied pointedly. Alexandra smiled. Which is exactly what drew me to Ryan in the first place. His passion for his work and complete disinterest in my public profile was refreshing. Brad's smile tightened as he processed being effectively put in his place. Well, you two certainly make a surprising couple. The best ones often are. Alexandra countered smoothly. Just then, I noticed Stephanie watching our table from across the room, her expression a mixture of shock and something that looked remarkably like regret. Her cardiothoracic surgeon was speaking to her, but her attention was fixed firmly on Alexandra and me. The server returned with our first course, providing a natural end to the conversation. As Brad and Melanie reluctantly returned to their tables, I turned to Alexandra in amazement. I don't know how to thank you for this, I said quietly. She smiled, her expression softening. Consider it a favor between colleagues. Besides, watching your family recalibrate their entire perception of you in real time is honestly entertaining. They're practically tripping over themselves. People like that always do when confronted with someone they perceive as higher status. She took a bite of her appetizer. Though I'm genuinely confused why they didn't already respect you. NetSecure's valuation after your last funding round was impressive by any standard. In my family, technology has always been considered a lesser career path than law or finance. Less prestigious somehow. Well, they seem to be adjusting their perspective rather quickly. She observed as we watched my parents animatedly explaining something to their tablemates, frequently glancing in our direction. As dinner progressed, I found myself genuinely enjoying Alexandra's company. Behind her public persona as a tech mogul was a sharp wit and a surprising kindness. She asked thoughtful questions about my work and shared insights about the industry without condescension. When the time came for speeches, we listened to the standard wedding toasts, the best man's slightly inappropriate jokes, the maid of honor's tearful memories, the father's formal welcomes to their new in-laws. Throughout it all, Alexandra's hand occasionally brushed against mine in a convincing display of casual intimacy. After dinner, as promised, the photographer approached to escort us to the bride and groom for photos. Jessica looked stunning in her wedding gown, and her expression when she realized who my date was proved almost as satisfying as my parents' reaction had been. Ryan! You didn't tell us you were bringing Alexandra Carter, Jessica exclaimed, looking between us in astonishment. A recent development, Alexandra explained smoothly, extending her congratulations to the couple. Matthew, the groom, seemed equally impressed. We're honored you could join us, Ms. Carter. Are you too? Let's just say Ryan's been my most exciting discovery this year, Alexandra replied with a smile that suggested intimate knowledge. The photographer positioned us for several photos, Alexandra naturally tucking herself against my side as if we'd been a couple for months. Her performance was flawless, the way she looked at me with apparent affection, the casual touches, the inside jokes she invented on the spot. As we returned to the reception, the band began playing a slow song, and couples moved to the dance floor. Shall we? Alexandra asked, nodding toward the dancing. Are you sure you want to continue this charade? I asked quietly. You've already done more than enough. I promised you a dance, didn't I? She took my hand. Besides, we should give them the full show. As I led Alexandra to the dance floor, I caught my mother watching us with an expression of dumbfounded pride that I hadn't seen directed at me in years. My father was deep in conversation with Thomas Wellington, gesturing in our direction with newfound enthusiasm. Melanie was obviously explaining our relationship to a group of rapt listeners, likely embellishing details she couldn't possibly know. And as Alexandra and I began to dance, her hand in mine and her other resting lightly on my shoulder, I realized that for the first time at a family event, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the disappointment. I wasn't the subject of pitying glances and well-intentioned setups. All it had taken was the arrival of a billionaire pretending to be in love with me. 1 year later, I found myself back at the Grand Windsor Hotel, adjusting my tie in front of a mirror remarkably similar to the one where I'd prepared for Jessica's wedding. This time, however, I wasn't dreading the event ahead. This time, I wasn't alone. Need help with that? Alexandra appeared in the bathroom doorway, looking elegant in a midnight blue gown that complemented my tuxedo. Just making sure it's straight. I turned to face her. You look incredible. As do you. She stepped forward, making a minor adjustment to my already perfect tie. Ready to face the Mitchell family circus again? With you by my side? Absolutely. The past year had transformed my life in ways I could never have anticipated. What had begun as an impromptu charade at my cousin's wedding had evolved into something neither Alexandra nor I had expected. After our performance at Jessica's reception, we'd exchanged contact information with the genuine intention of exploring business synergies between our companies. Alexandra had been legitimately interested in NetSecure's encryption protocols, seeing potential applications for Carter Innovations' expanding cybersecurity division. What started as professional meetings quickly developed into something more. Our similar backgrounds, both from families that didn't understand our passion for technology, both driven to prove ourselves through building something meaningful, created an understanding between us that I'd never experienced with anyone else. 6 months after Jessica's wedding, Carter Innovations acquired NetSecure in a deal that made headlines in the tech world and made me a very wealthy man. I joined Alexandra's executive team, heading the newly expanded security division while maintaining creative control over the technologies I'd developed. And somewhere along the way, the pretense of a relationship had given way to the real thing. Alexandra Carter, brilliant, driven, and surprisingly vulnerable when you earned her trust, had become the most important person in my life. Today, we were attending another Mitchell family wedding. My cousin Brad was marrying the daughter of a prominent Boston family, an alliance that had been years in the making. The irony wasn't lost on me that Brad, who had spent years mocking my social status, had insisted on inviting Alexandra and me, now the most notable couple in the family. Ryan! Alexandra! My mother's voice carried across the hotel lobby as we descended from our suite. She hurried toward us, arms outstretched, my father following at a more dignified pace. The transformation in my parents over the past year had been almost comical. My mother, who had once lamented my career choice at every opportunity, now proudly told her friends about my visionary work in cybersecurity. My father, who had dismissed technology as a lesser field than law, now asked detailed questions about our latest projects and innovations. You both look wonderful, my mother gushed, embracing Alexandra with the warmth she reserved for her favorite people. Will you sit with us during the ceremony? We've been saving seats. We wouldn't miss it, Alexandra replied graciously, having developed a genuine if somewhat guarded relationship with my parents. As we made our way to the ceremony space, I reflected on how dramatically my position within the family had changed. Relatives who had once barely acknowledged me now sought my opinion on everything from investment advice to college recommendations for their children. Melanie, who had once created dating profiles for me without permission, now asked Alexandra for career guidance. Having returned to marketing with a position at a firm that frequently worked with tech companies, the ceremony itself was predictably lavish, though in my opinion lacking the genuine warmth of the relationship Alexandra and I had built. Brad and his bride Jennifer made a picture-perfect couple, both from the right families, both with the right credentials, both saying exactly the right words. I wondered if either of them had ever experienced the kind of authentic connection that comes from being truly seen and valued for who you are. During the reception, Aunt Clara found us at our table, her eyes twinkling with the same mischievous intelligence that had always made her my favorite relative. You two continue to scandalize and delight this family in equal measure, she said, taking a seat beside us. I've never enjoyed family gatherings more than I have this past year. Alexandra laughed. I take that as high praise, Clara. It is. Clara's expression grew more serious as she looked at me. I always knew you'd find your way, Ryan. Though I admit, even I couldn't have predicted quite how spectacular that way would be. I got lucky, I said, glancing at Alexandra. No, Clara corrected firmly. You stayed true to yourself when it would have been easier to conform. You built something meaningful instead of just fitting into someone else's idea of success. The universe has a way of recognizing authenticity, eventually. As Clara moved on to greet other guests, Alexandra squeezed my hand under the table. She's right, you know. What attracted me to you wasn't your company's valuation or your programming skills, impressive as they are. It was your integrity. Your unwillingness to pretend to be someone you're not, even when it would have made your life easier. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from the lonely, judged outsider I'd been at Jessica's wedding to the man I was today. The external trappings had changed dramatically, my net worth, my professional status. My relationship with a woman widely considered one of the most impressive entrepreneurs of our generation. But the most profound change had been internal. I no longer measured my worth through my family's eyes. I no longer felt the need to apologize for my passions or my priorities. I had found a partner who valued me for exactly who I was, not who she wanted me to be. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned to value myself. As Brad and Jennifer took to the dance floor for their first dance, Alexandra leaned close to whisper in my ear. Penny, for your thoughts? I was just thinking about what Clara said about authenticity, I replied. About how much energy I spent trying to earn approval from people who were never going to understand me. And now I realize that the only approval that matters is from the people who see you clearly and love you anyway. Not despite your differences, but because of them. Alexandra smiled. The private smile she reserved for our most genuine moments. That might be the most valuable discovery either of us has ever made. Later, as we swayed together on the dance floor, I caught sight of my reflection in one of the ballroom's ornate mirrors. I barely recognized the confident man looking back at me, dancing with the brilliant woman in his arms, surrounded by family members who now treated him with respect bordering on reverence. The external validation that I had craved for so long had finally arrived. But the beautiful irony was that I no longer needed it. The journey had taught me that true success wasn't measured in family approval, or social status, or even professional achievements. Though I'd found all three. True success was the freedom to be authentically yourself and to connect with others who valued that authenticity. As the evening drew to a close, Alexandra and I said our goodbyes to my family and made our way back to our suite. You know, she said as we waited for the elevator, we never did properly thank Jessica and Matthew for inadvertently bringing us together. We sent them a very generous wedding gift, I reminded her. True. But I was thinking we might host a dinner for them when they returned from their anniversary trip. A small gesture of appreciation for a wedding that changed both our lives. I smiled, remembering the frightened, insecure man who had walked alone into Jessica's wedding a year ago, dreading the judgment and pity of his family. I think that's a wonderful idea, I said, pulling Alexandra close as the elevator doors closed behind us. That night, as Alexandra slept beside me, I reflected on the strange and beautiful path that had led me here. I thought about the young Ryan who had built computers in his bedroom while other kids played sports, the college student who had chosen passion over family approval, the entrepreneur who had believed in his vision when few others did. I thought about Aunt Clara, who had always told me to stay true to myself, about Alexandra, who had seen my worth from the beginning, about the family who had finally recognized what had been there all along. And I realized that the most profound lesson of my journey wasn't that external validation eventually comes if you're successful enough. It was that when you learn to validate yourself, to recognize your own worth regardless of others' opinions, you create the space for authentic connections that no amount of social status could ever provide. As I drifted toward sleep, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for the wealth or success or family approval, but for the freedom to be myself and the privilege of being truly known. What's your story? Have you ever had to choose between being true to yourself and gaining approval from others? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories that remind us of the power of authenticity. And if this story touched you in any way, please share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' opinions of you, but by the courage to be authentically yourself.